Hey, so a little bit about me. I hate doing intros for conversations that I have with people, uh, but I feel like it's really helpful rather than just diving right in. So, the conversation that you're about to hear is between myself and Chris Orzechowski. Chris is a retention marketer, runs his own email agency, and has worked with some of your favorite brands, including Carnival Snacks and a bunch of others. You can visit him on his website, on his social media to learn more about what he's doing right now. The main purpose behind interviewing him was we wanted to talk about his new book, The Moat, which you can now buy on Amazon and probably his website as well. And that is it. That's all I have to say to you about this interview, and probably all that you need to know to dive in. And I'll probably make a conclusion at the end to give you a fun little bookend to this conversation. So, you're welcome. Because I was reading through like the notes that I took on your book, The Moat, and there's one line that really stood out to me, which I feel like so many people need to hear, like e-commerce or otherwise. Is like the best American brands don't sell products; they sell an aspirational lifestyle. No matter what you sell, if you own an e-commerce brand, you are not in the product game, you're in the identity game. Can you
hmm
tell me a little bit about like your experience with that, just with people that you've worked with, like how you've come to kind of understand this idea about the 100-year brand?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was just me noticing anecdotal examples from my life and seeing, like what products, like you take like Jordan shoes, right? Like when Nike came out with Jordans, like that was like, why did people buy those shoes? Was there a technological feature that was that much better than any other pair of shoes? No, you wanted to be like Michael Jordan, right? Like, so it was very much, that's one example. Another example in apparel is like Ralph Lauren. I always go back to that example. Like, what he did was he took this classic, iconic, Americana old money identity and made it accessible, right? And you even think about the cars that people drive. Like most cars are pretty much 90% the same nowadays, besides a handful of features here and there, or 95% the same. It's like, why does someone pay 10 times more for a car than, for a car A than car B? It's because in the modern world, your identity is based on the things that you buy and the things that you own, right? Because that's how you express yourself to others, right? It's how you status signal. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing. It just is what it is, right? Like that's why people buy, there's so many different brands, right? It's not like you're in a village and there's one blacksmith and there's one, doctor and there's one butcher and like there's hundreds of brands, thousands of brands in every category imaginable. So it's like the way that people make those decisions is, what if I buy this product, what does it say about me? What does it say to myself? Like I am this kind of person who identifies with this belief system, right? I mean, we're seeing this now with carnivore snacks. If you've been following along what's been going on there, like why are people so supportive? It's because of the brand identity that we've created and cultivated in terms of being a carnivore, like what that means. Like there's a whole set of beliefs and values that are kind of baked into that identity itself. So when people align with this aspirational identity that you're putting out, it gives them more of a reason to buy from you, right? Because there's always someone who's going to be selling what you sell or something incredibly similar, and they're going to be selling it for 50% less, and it's going to be more readily available. So it's like, how do you overcome that in the world of direct consumer, right? Like in the beef world, direct consumer meat sales, it's like there's meat everywhere. You can go in any supermarket in the country and get meat, right? It's like, why would someone inconvenience themselves to buy from your local ranch rather than just, throwing it in their cart? It's like you need to give people those reasons. And, every brand has these reasons. It's just a lot of them don't express it. They don't build an identity. They don't build any kind of aspirational vision. Like that's the heart of advertising itself, is like aspiration, right? It's like we don't need any of this shit. We don't need anything. We don't even need a lot. You can make the argument we don't need electricity. All these things are conveniences of the modern world, right? So why do we buy anything? Because we want to make our lives better, because we have a vision for who we want to become. And the tools, the things that we buy in our lives are the vehicles that get us there.
I heard an interesting quote. I think this was from Ezra Firestone, and he was basically saying the best product doesn't win, the best promise wins.
Mhm.
And so, and the example he gave like Allbirds, Quip toothbrushes, which I dove a little deeper on, and like Stanley mugs. You look at like Quip or Stanley, and they have basically turned like this normal, just everyday item, a toothbrush or a tumbler, and it's like become an accessory. It's become something that's like an expression of your identity. And they have like these limited edition drops, like all these crazy colorways and like all this stuff. And I think you actually shared that article about how the CEO of Stanley was able to do that, because he actually came over from Crocs and did something similar with Crocs with those celebrity partnerships, those limited edition drops and things. And so, yeah, this idea that like so many people are looking to build the best product, and especially like people who are only product focused and they don't really understand marketing at all. They're just trying to make the best product. And it's like, dude, Philips Sonicare toothbrushes will always be better than Quip toothbrushes.
Mhm.
Quip's just making an amazing promise, and that's how they were able to do so well in that market.
Yeah, I mean, you look at like Stanley, like, do they hold water better than a regular, like any other regular water bottle? Like, I don't know, maybe, maybe they do, but like that's not why they're selling, right? It's because like exactly what you're saying. There, and again, it depends on like the market you want to go after. Like they chose to go after, like, I know their core market is like, the suburban mom, and that's why they, instead of like having like a thick water bottle, they kind of punched in the bottom so you could fit it into the cup holder of your SUV, as you're driving around town. Yeah, exactly. That one right there,
I'm the
right?
suburban mom. Yeah.
So well, there you go. But yeah, I know that that was like their core that they, and then there's obviously, the ancillary avatars and things that spread out from there. But like, yeah, initially the brand was for like blue collar guys who like worked at a construction site. So like they just changed it to that aspirational image. And, you know, for certain markets, like let's say like you're in hiking, right? Like if you're selling a water bottle to a hiker, yeah, there might be very specific features, the product weight, the nozzle. And if that's the market you want to go after, then like, yeah, working on those things might make more sense. But, even then, it's like there's still probably multiple options, and there's probably your competitors have comparable features, right? So it's like, what is going to be the differentiator? And these are the things that like you have to infuse in your copy and your messaging, because that's the stuff that makes you stand out, right? Like you're not going to be alone. You might find a blue ocean, but it's just a matter of time before the competitors rush in, right? Like it always happens all the time in every single market. And it doesn't mean that you can't win if you have competitors. It just means you just have to know who you're for and what you're bringing people towards. Like what is the mountain that your customer is trying to climb, right? Like, and how do you get them up that mountain towards their goals?
Yeah. How do you think about then, or what's your process of creating that? Because it's like we can identify it, we can identify examples of it, but for you, like you have so much experience like doing this with brands. Like what do you where do you even start?
I mean, I think the easiest way to start is by going in the opposite direction, saying like, who is the common enemy, right? Because if you identify who the common enemy is, that you like, Blair Warren has that book, the 5 sentence persuasion course, I believe it's called. Really great book. It's a quick book. And essentially it's, if I'm recalling correctly from memory, it's like, you can persuade anyone to do anything if you justify their failures, confirm their suspicions, throw rocks at common enemies. I'm forgetting the other two off the top of my head. I should have this memorized.
I had it right here in front of me a second ago. I was trying to look for it.
Yeah, but like those 5 things, like the common enemies thing, like if you know who the enemy is, it's easier to see who the allies are too, right? Um, so I think if you like start there, that's oftentimes like, who are you not for, right? Like what are you against? Then you start to get it starts to get a little bit easier to get a clear picture of who we want to be speaking to and what their goals are and like who those people want to become, right? And a lot of it too is like there's the whole exercise, the copywriting exercise of like feature benefit dimensionalization, right? And like a lot of people are just like features. It's like the water bottle has a straw nozzle, and that's like the feature. It's like, well, what's the benefit? Like, why is that good? It's good because you don't have to unscrew the bottle every time, so you could drink it with one hand, right? Which means, and then there's the dimensionalization piece, which is like, how does your life change as a result? which means you can take your mug anywhere and never have to pay for a water bottle again because you have, this convenient thing that you can fit in your cup holder and show off to all your friends or whatever, right? Like, might not be the best example, but like, there's always this chain of like, so what, so what, so what, like continuing to dimensionalize and show how someone's life is different after they change the product. And it's like, well, why does their life need to be different? Because they're moving towards this identity. So it's just, it's not easy to do. Always, it takes a lot of thinking. Like that's the thing. I wish I could distill it down to like a 3-step formula. But a lot of times it's just observing. It's observing people, right? And seeing who they are and how they act. Like you go to parties. I love just people watching, like at parties or at like out in public and like why are people saying what they're saying? Why are they telling the stories? Why are they reacting in certain ways? Do they order this thing off the menu rather than this? Like you can it's weird. It's like you can kind of see everyone's out there just play acting. LARPing is the person that they want to be. You know what I mean? And not everyone wants to be the same person, right? Let's like, you might have someone who wants to be like the 30-something woman who is like a New York socialite, loves going out to parties and has a career and blah, blah, blah. That's very different than like the dude who's like a crunchy hippie who loves growing vegetables in his backyard and wears, all linen and has long dreadlocks. And like, there's all different types of people out there, thousands and thousands of different archetypes, but like there are defined archetypes, and you start to see like, well, who are the influencers these people follow? Why do they follow them? What is interesting about those people to my prospect? They're trying to move in that direction, right? So you can almost kind of put people into buckets, which I know sounds a little bit almost like, I don't know, sociopathic, psychopathic for me to say, but like there are definitely defined buckets. I mean, why does Facebook targeting work so well? Because they have buckets, in their machine learning algorithm. Like they know who's bucketed where, who's interested in what things. Like no one's truly unique, right? I mean, there might be some combinations that make people more unique than the average person, but everyone fits into these neatly defined buckets, and there might be thousands of them. But we all have like there's only so many different types of identities that people aspire to. There's characters, you think about characters in movies or in literature, right? Like it's if you consume enough media, you eventually just start to see patterns over and over again. And I know this is very like abstract and a little bit like esoteric way to think about it, but like this is how I think about everything. I'm like, who are these people? Why are they buying this thing? Right? Like, what is the ultimate end goal with this product?
So it sounds like, I know you said there's no 3-step kind of framework to go through it, but it sounds like the way that you think about it is you look at like the existing customer base or the existing archetype and basically work your way from the bottom up, right? In terms of like, it's like it has to start with the end user, and then you find out like who do they aspire to be, what kind of stuff, like people are they following, influencers and things, and then like what does the aspiration need to look like?
Yeah, I mean, like every business's greatest asset is their existing customer list, their database, right? And this is why I'm so big on retention marketing, because like the retention stuff influences the acquisition, because you can go out and get customers a million different ways, which is cool, right? But like it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get the right kind of people that are good long term for the brand, right? When you have your customer database, there's always an 80-20. So the top 20% of customers are going to drive 80% of the revenue, and the bottom 20% of customers are going to give you 80% of your headaches, right? So it's like knowing that, and knowing that Pareto distribution is true and within a few varying degrees here and there, either direction. You can identify like who are the people we want more of, because every customer is not created equally. I've seen this in my own list. I've sold, stuff that's $10,000, $20,000 more to some people on my list. I'm like, well, how do I go get more of those people instead of the people who come in and buy off like, a $5, $10 promotion that I'm running for like a tripwire offer, who buy once and never buy anything else. And they hit up customer service 4 times and are really annoying. It's like, how do I shoo away those people and get more of the high quality people, right? Because maybe they even came from the same source, right? But they came in from different motivations. So it's like, okay, well, what is the motivation? Like if we speak more about this motivation, we'll get more of the better people. So, and your people for your business might not be, the same avatar I've seen this within industries. Like there's two people who sell very similar products, but like one has a great customer list and one has a really crappy customer list, and they're in the same market. The reason why is because their own unique spin, their own unique branding and messaging and style tends to attract a better quality customer versus someone else. So like all this stuff has to be really intentional, but it starts with that dialogue with your own list. That's why I'm such a big fan of like email marketing, because if you're always emailing and you're sending good stuff and you're being the leader in your market, being a thought leader, if you want to call yourself that, and you're publishing content, you're telling stories, and you're taking people behind the scenes, you're going to naturally start a dialogue with people. They're going to tell you what's important. You're going to start to see who are the people who are like the super fans of my brand, and what's the common thread between all those people, and how do we use that data to then go get more of them and continue to retain them. And then everyone else who doesn't fit that profile, if they want to come along for the ride, totally cool, but we're not going to prioritize them in our efforts. And that all happens from database mining. That all happens from having conversations with your people. When they email you, you email them back. If they leave a comment, you see what they say, right? You interact with these people, you get inside their heads. And that is what leads to like really good marketing. And that's what I do with all my clients. I'm always looking, I'm always like, who's engaging? What are they saying? Why are they saying what they're saying? Look, like even if people comment on your stuff, go over their profile, look at them. What are they posting about? What are they talking about? What do they look like? Right. And you start to get these really valuable insights. I mean, I've done this with my own list. It's one of these quote unquote, things that don't scale. And sometimes I'm like, man, I'm always just answering emails and talking to people, but over time, I've realized that's the greatest asset that I have, is that dialogue with my people, because I have people who've been buying from me for 7, 8 years now, and they'll continue to buy because I understand them and I know them, and there's a know, like, and trust built up.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that, because I think to the people in Farm Rebel, a lot of times where people run into issues is like, it's like they're not thinking about their customers as people. They're not thinking about like trying to get in their heads. They're kind of just like, okay, I have this list, but it's like, no, these are living, breathing people on the other end of this email list. And it's like, it's so easy to forget that because it's just the email address and the name. But yeah, I love the human centric approach to it. And I think it's refreshing to hear you say that, because like, it's even when you get to the higher levels, it's not like that changes. Like, yeah, you add in some data. Yeah, you add in, some extra complexity on top of it. But at the end of the day, it's still just people. I did find the Blair Warren thing, just to straighten that out. So it's there are 5 things you need to do in order to persuade anyone to do anything: justify their failures, allay their fears, throw rocks at common enemies, confirm suspicions, and then encourage their dreams.
Yes.
That will persuade, yeah, anyone to do anything. And it reminds me too of the quote by, oh my gosh, he's on Twitter. I follow him on Twitter. David Deutsch, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
He was at David Ogilvy's ad agency, and he said, "It's not enough for someone to win; someone else has to lose."
Mm-hmm.
So it's like level 1 is like we're gonna try to get you to the transformation. Level 2 is like your enemies are gonna fall apart.
Yeah, I mean, well, have you read Blood Meridian?
No.
It's a Cormac McCarthy book. It's one of my favorites. And there's this quote from the judge, and I might not have it verbatim, but there's this one quote that Judge Holden says, and he says, war. Let me pull up the quote, because I don't want to butcher it, but it's like, war was always there even before man. It waited. War quote. Judge Holden. War was always here before man was. War waited for him. The ultimate trade awaiting its ultimate practitioner. Right. So like, yeah, it's maybe modern day life isn't as brutal as it was, hundreds of thousands of years ago. Right. But it's in like our DNA. Right. Like there's always the fight. Like it's just part of us, and like there's no amount of social engineering is going to take that out of people. It's coded into every cell of our body. Right. So it doesn't mean we have to get like violent. It just means that like we know that there are these primal desires that always exist within our brains and in our bodies. And if we can rally people around a cause, then that usually helps. I mean, it's not going to hurt, right? Like if you can help your people achieve victory over that common enemy, it gives because like most people, they just go through life and like nothing matters. You know what I mean? And I know I'm not like a nihilist or anything like that, but like a lot of people, like what does their life look like? They wake up, they go to work, they go home, do the same shit every day. It's boring. You know what I mean? Why are people addicted to social media? Because social media is interesting. There's always something going on, right? People are bored out of their minds and they have nothing to like. Most people don't have anything to like look forward to, you know? So in your marketing, if you could be someone who gives purpose and meaning and cause, that's always going to help. And I think some of the best brands do that, right? And like maybe it's that aspirational identity that they're trying to create for themselves, or maybe it is triumph over a common enemy. But, you know, it's like a cheat code when you do that stuff. And as long as it's organic, like obviously, right? But you get to determine who your brand is for and who you're against. And I think those are some of the things that a lot of people just don't do. They don't like focus on. I mean, in health and wellness and food, we see it a lot, especially in food. Whether it's meat or other kind of products, you know, but I think that some of this is like religion, you know what I mean? At least with food, certainly. I mean, if you look at like religions, most religions have dietary recommendations or even guidelines. So like there is some very deep, you know, multi-millennial uh correlation between food and like ideology. So if you're marketing like a food brand or any kind of like, you know, food product, like that is something that is kind of, you have the opportunity to bake it right in. Like if you are selling meat, you have a lot of common enemies. You have the government, you have all these international organizations that are concerned about, you know, climate change and all this other. They're saying cow farts are destroying the world. It's like, couldn't be further from the truth. We know that that's not true, you know, like objectively speaking. But so we have the common enemy there. And then obviously the enemy has their own set of beliefs and they're trying to throw rocks at us, right? But you need to rally people. You need to give them a rallying point because otherwise it's like, who cares? Who cares about anything? You know, people need something to grasp onto. They need something, they need to feel like they're part of the tribe because they're not. They're atomized. They're going to work in a cubicle every day with people that they may like or may not like. And they're just living, just floating like atoms, right? So you need to give them something to latch onto. Hope this isn't too dark or like
No, dude, if anything, it's like it's almost kind of like it makes me like feel almost biblical about it because
Mhm.
like when you go through the Bible, you realize, right, like the struggle more than anything is against powers and principalities. It's not against, you know, individuals necessarily. It's the powers, it's the establishment. And you need it. You almost need it in marketing. Like I'm thinking of carnivore snacks, like when you were talking. It's like if there wasn't such a this, you know, crazy ideology, you know, around climate change and veganism and, you know, you will eat the bugs, you know, that like that kind of thing. Like if that wasn't happening, it wouldn't be as polarizing towards like in your favor for carnivore snacks. And so it almost works to your benefit. Now I'm remembering an email that you sent out, which was like it was about low T politicians.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that was like, I was like, man, it's so true, but it's also so like, I'm like, I opened it up and I was like, wow, like I can't believe someone sent me this. Like, this is what I believe, but I wasn't able to say. And like everyone else was too scared to say it, you know?
Yeah.
So that also works in your favor too.
Yeah. I mean, and Mark gives me like total creative freedom, which is why he's like my favorite client ever. But you know, it is like you see what people are doing, right? Like you think about the idea of a common enemy, like your enemy's doing things, you know, like they're trying to ban meat in school. School lunches are as you know terrible to begin with, and now you're taking away the meat. It's like, what are you going to eat? It's like eating cardboard. You know what I mean? Like it's terrible food. It's not good, and it's getting worse, right? And it's getting worse not because of any science, because the science is on our side. It's getting worse because of ideology, right? So it's like, okay, well, you're just going to passively sit back and you know just get steamrolled by the Leviathan, or are you going to do something about it, right? And yeah, people are afraid to fight, but like you look at your ancestors, you know, like I love the story about the winged hussars in Poland in like 1619 or whatever that famous battle was when they drove out the Turks. people had to fight, you know? And here we are in this comfortable world with our water bottles and our computers and no real problems, you know? I mean, there's problems, but like no, you know, for most people like aren't being hunted down or having to get, you know, pick up a broadsword and go out and start hacking away, you know, at an incoming invading force. At least not yet. I mean, who knows? We'll see. We'll see what the future holds. We'll never know, right? But it's like, again, it's just in our DNA. It's like we need that. It's part of what makes us human, you know? You might not like it, but that's what it is. And I think like that being infused in the marketing, it's like, again, people used to have a village, or you'd, you know, be in a war band, or you'd have a tribe, or you'd have some kind of identity, common shared identity. And the internet is awesome for many things, but it's also fractured a lot of that. But it's giving you an opportunity to, like, if no one in your local town is into, you know, no one in your local life is into those things, you could find your tribe online, right? So knowing the tribal nature of people, you kind of have to build your customer base into a tribe of sorts, right? And that's what locks people in for the long haul, right? Best brands. I mean, look at Harley Davidson, right? I mean, they definitely have clear things that they stand for and don't stand for, right? That is very much an identity. It's a 100+ year old company. People get tattoos of the logo on their body, right? Like people, like it's funny because like in like the direct to consumer world, everyone's like, oh, 30% of your customers are going to stay. That's the industry standard. You know, it's really hard to get above that. And I'm like, does Harley Davidson have 30% retention? Like they probably have way higher. They've had people buy, you know, decade after decade, right? And obviously, like, you know, not every brand is going to be Harley Davidson, but I think the best brand, like they're someone who they tick all the boxes, you know, like they've done it correctly. They've done it the right way. And I think when you get that stuff first, that's why like in the Moat, like the first chapter or the first piece of that analogy, M is for mission, right? Because if you give people that mission to rally around, the offers get a little bit easier, acquisition gets easier, and then traction is where things really take off and you start doing the retention stuff. But it all starts with that mission. Otherwise, it's like you don't have a North Star. So you need to give people that North Star to point towards.
And speaking of offers, the way you broke down front end and back end offers in this book. So we talked about the first M. I feel like we really went deep on that. The M is the mission, and then the O is offers. So when we're going from kind of this big, you know, sort of abstract mission of like what we stand for as a brand, getting it to the offer, I think was where it got really interesting. And that's where like the rubber meets the road, literally for Harley Davidson. Cause I'm thinking about like the fact that the front end offer for them is the motorcycle. It's like that's the thing that someone has to buy to like become a part of the Harley Davidson world. But then from there, it's the stickers, it's the shirts, the clothes, like everything else that they sell around that. And it's interesting because like I think personally before I read that, I always thought of back end offers as like it has to be a higher end or you know a more expensive offer. But then when you said that, I was like, well, no, that makes perfect sense. You have to buy the Harley Davidson first. That has to be the front end offer.
Yeah, like if you just bought a Harley Davidson jacket and started walking around town and you didn't have a bike, like people would probably like call you out. Like
The loser,
it
yeah.
would it'd be weird, right? Like, and yeah, like there should always be a higher back end. I mean, you know, a second bike could also be considered the back end, but like again, it's just like thinking through your brand. Like some people they're just like, I'm like, what's your front end offer? And they're like, we don't have one. We just drive traffic to the store. I'm like, okay. I mean, that might work okay. It might. Some people it does, right? If the site is well designed enough, what they're going to find is that naturally, just sending traffic to the site and letting people choose their own adventure, naturally, there's going to be some kind of, again, Pareto's law, 80/20 distribution, where, you know, there's going to be 20% of the products going to make up 80% of the sales. So, like, naturally, you will find, and if you've never done this analysis, like, you could, well, what are your best selling products, right? And then out of those best selling products, which ones lead to repeat purchases and high lifetime value? Because that will clue you in on okay, what actually is our front end, right? Some brands don't do this and they struggle, and some brands do this and they absolutely nail it. Like you look at Athletic Greens, like who's gonna Athletic Greens also has like I think I haven't bought from them in years, but like I know they had a fish oil. I think they had a protein powder. They might have other stuff too in the back end. But like no one's gonna why would you buy Athletic Greens fish oil? You know what I mean? Like that product specific until you bought the main powder, like the hero product, right? And they're $1 billion brand, right? I think they IPO'd, right? 1.2 billion, whatever it was. Because they kind of nailed front and back, and proactive is another one, skincare, right? Like they had their front end offer. They always run to the front end offer. They have other products in the product line, but they focus on the front end offer. And, especially when you're going to advertise, like this is where it gets really important. Like when people are like, yeah, I want to do ads. I'm like, okay, well, what is the objective here? Like, what are we trying to sell? Like, what's your front end? Because you got to pick one product, at least for the first campaign. One product, one ad campaign. Can we make that work? And sometimes, like, especially like when I work with like meat producers, they're like, well, I don't know. I'm like, we have 100 products. Like, what is the product where when you get it in people's hands, they tend to become good customers and buy over and over again, right? That we could build an offer around. It's like if you had a store and someone comes into the store, like a physical brick and mortar retail location, someone came in and said, hey, I know I need to buy something in here. I'm just not sure where to start. What would you tell them, right? I mean, you might ask them some questions, but most likely any kind of store, it's like, well, if this is your first time here, I'd recommend you start with this. The reason why is because blah, 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 blah. Every brand like has that. And you need to kind of run through that line of questioning and also look at your data and say what makes the most sense, because all your products aren't going to be permanent. I mean, you might have some products that are just perennial and you'll just continue to sell for years and decades to come. That'll just be core staple products. Like, you think about like LL Bean, like the bean boots, right? Like they've had those for like 100 years, but they probably cycled through tons of shirts and shorts and jackets and hats and everything else. But like that's been a product that's been a core thing in their product line, right? So obviously, if you're a newer business, you may or may not know this, but I think it's just easy when you know what the front end is, because if you know what the front end is, it's like what is the piece of bait we're going to put on the hook to acquire a customer, right? What is the best piece of bait that's going to catch the kind of fish that we want to catch? And it takes a little bit of thinking to go through this, but once you know what that is, everything gets easier. Your ad campaigns get easier, even your marketing, your email marketing, your social media, everything gets easier once you know what that is and what you should be building your funnels around. But people don't do this. And then they're like, I don't know how to grow. I'm like, well, the best companies in the world do this. There's a reason. Success leaves clues.
And I think a lot of people overthink it too. They're like, oh, I have 5 different things that, maybe I want to have as a front end offer. And I think for most businesses, I'd love to hear your experience too with this, but like you really only need like 1, maybe 2 front end offers to get people in the door and just
Yeah.
sell those. Like it simplifies your marketing. Like you said, it makes it so much easier than trying to work with like a ton of SKUs on the front end.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to scale 5 things at once if you've never scaled one thing, right? Like that's another aspect of it too. And it's just how do you when I go to a restaurant, I'll always look at the waiter and say, what's good here? What should I start with? It's my first time here. Like, what's the dish that's gonna like give me the essence of this place? That's gonna, and they always tell me, they say, well, if it's first time here, this is what you should start with. It's the most popular, it's people's favorite thing, blah, 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 blah. And then if I like that, I'm like, okay, I'll probably try everything else on the menu if we keep coming here, right? And if we keep coming here enough times. And that's what it is right there. It's like, what's the thing that's going to give people good experience again and coming back, right? That's the front end offer. Boom. Take that, test it out. If you can get it to work, great. If for some reason you can't get it to work, you try something else. But like if you had one bullet in the gun, what's your move, right? What's the product that you believe in? If you had to get rid of all your other products and just sell one on the front end, what would it be, right? And that's another good thought exercise to go through too. But if you're a low SKU, like sometimes there's brands, they have like one product and then like it's easy. It's just like get first sale and get a subscription or get a continuity or get a bigger back end purchase, right? But not every brand is set up like that, especially not in the meat space. A lot of times people have beef, pork, chicken, lamb, maybe like game meats, all of other stuff, right? Or packaged goods, things like that. But you know, it's always thinking like what do we want to use to acquire and what do we want to use to monetize?
We've gone through M, that's mission. We have O, we have the front end offer. We know what the back end offers are. What does acquisition look like from there? Specifically, I'll be specific because I know it changes depending on the size of the company. But if you're going from like maybe $0 to $10,000 a month.
Yeah, I mean, basically just saying, can we buy customers at a profit, right? Can we go to an ad platform? I mean, it could be influencers and even organic social. Like, there's a lot of different ways, a lot of ways to acquire customers, but everything is going to either cost time or cost money. So there's always an acquisition cost, right? Whether it's you writing 100 social posts, that takes time and you have to be paid for your time somehow. Even if you're working for free, you're taking time away from something else that could earn your money, right? Or it's giving an ad platform $1 and seeing if you can get $1 back, or even more dollars back, right? More than what you spent. Um, if you know what the front end offer is, then essentially it's just crafting messaging around the offer and giving people a reason to act now, overcoming objections, explain the product benefits, having a story or some kind of newsworthy hook or something that, grabs people's attention. Dan Kennedy's really good at this. Gary Halbert was really good at this, turning their ads into news stories, right? New Jersey man discovers, the most nutritious, meat stick ever created, or whatever, like something, just like it turns into a story and people are like, huh, what's this about? Right. So you grab their attention, then introduce the product, explain the benefits, give them a reason to act now instead of waiting. And then, hopefully the economics of the funnel work out to where you could make more than $1 back when you spend $1 with ads. So that's obviously no oversimplification of it. I mean, there's no real use in getting into the nitty gritty of the ads manager and all that kind of stuff. But all that stuff is easily figure outable. Like, the main thing is, like, is the offer good? Did you explain it well? Have you demonstrated its uniqueness and the reason why people need it? Have you overcome their objections? And then can you actually get someone to say, yes, I want to buy this from you? If you could do that, then acquisition is just, tinkering, testing until you can just make, pour more money in the machine at a profit, right? Or at break even, or where you're, I had one guy I know who has a brand, and they actually go negative on the front end, really big e-commerce company, but they go negative on the front end because they know they have the reorders are so high that they recoup within like 30 days. So, like, again, the economics of that funnel work for them. So they've been able to scale up. So it's just math calculations after that, but it's just explaining the product and then saying, where can we roll this out? Where are our customers? How do we get in front of them? How do we scale this with dollars instead of labor, and do it in a profitable, sustainable way?
Yeah, and I think in the book you do a really nice job of like balancing the consumer psychology stuff and the metrics, the economics, because I see a lot of people, I'm just thinking of Farm Rebel again. I see a lot of people that like will do all of the behavioral stuff, all the direct response kind of tactics and things around their offer and their copy, and then they won't really know what they need to achieve in terms of their cost per result, right? When they're running these ads. And like, I'm like, well, now we have to go back. We have to reverse engineer all that. Do you know your numbers? Do you know what you can afford? There was someone in the program who was like crushing it with ads. He had like a 13-to-1 ROAS, but it took him 65 days to get the payback period. So he's like running around and he's like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm like, you should put more money into ads at all costs. Like, get more money into these ads right now. Take out a loan, do something. So yeah, it's really interesting to hear you say that, because like that's been my experience too. Is like there's not one right way to set up your economics, but they do have to make sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because then it's just like, it's what's the day zero return, what's your payback period, what's your profit period over a 12 or 18-month window, however you want to look at it. And then there's that calculation versus like your burn and your cash flow runway, and like how much you can afford to put into that based on the payback period, right? And so if you know those two things, it's not super hard. I mean, like, I had one, actually two funnels that I was running years ago that, within a 45-day period, I was hitting like a 1.15. I was like slightly negative on the front end, and then like after 45 days, I hit a 1.15 return. And then eventually I turned the ads off because I was like, it's not good enough, whatever, right? I was getting stuck at a spending cap. I couldn't like push past the spend cap for those ads. Instead of just leaving them on, I just said, screw it, we'll turn it off. When we dove into the forensic data later on, I had like and my lowest performing ads had like a 6.4x return over 18 months, and the highest ad set had like a 12x return over an 18-month period. And I'm like, I'm so stupid. Why did I not have the foresight to leave those on, because I could have just kept at the current spend limit and not tried to push past that spend limit. But again, like these are things that you learn as an entrepreneur, right? That's why like I put this stuff in the book, because it's just like, hey, learn from my own mistakes in terms of ads. But I think with ads too, like most people are scared, especially like farmers. And I get it. I mean, it's a tough business, and like most of them aren't marketers because, most e-commerce, even outside of like ranching, like just most e-commerce people are not marketing people, they're product people, right? They make a really awesome product and they have to learn the marketing stuff. So it's hard and it's scary. But what I tell people is, do people sell what you're selling? And they say yes. And I say, well, if someone is selling what you're selling with ads already and you've seen it, then you should probably try it out too. Because it's not like you're selling something that's never been sold with an ad before, right? Sometimes people are like, I want to, get email subscribers and try to sell them. Like you could do that, but you could also just sell your product on the front end. Like you could also just do a conversion objective and try to make sales. And guess what? Like, especially like with ranchers, I'm like, have you ever seen anyone sell meat through a Facebook ad before? They say, yeah, all the time. I say, okay, well, then why can't you do it? So I don't know. So, well, if other people are doing it, you probably figure it out, right? Like it's not rocket science. We're not trying to put a man on the moon. We're just trying to be like, hey, we have this meat. It has these advantages. Here's why you should buy it. Would you like to buy it? And then letting the algorithm go and find the people who are hand raisers and say, yes, I'm interested in that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the long-term view of it, I think, is the real key. And it's like you really have to balance like the short term. And I think part of this goes back to mission. It's like if you have that strong mission, you can kind of like look back to that and say, okay, we're in this for the long haul. Like we're here for more than just like what we can make in a year. And the reality is like it's going to take time for it to snowball. We're trying to plant a forest here. Like we can't dig up the thing as soon as it sprouts. We got to wait for it to grow. And the returns really do compound, but it takes so much time. And when people leave the Farm Rebel program, sometimes they'll like message us back and be like, I finally, it finally took off for me. It finally started to work. And it's like, yeah, because you had to invest in, basically nothing. Like you weren't getting anything back for a while, but you were like kind of compounding those assets. So yeah, it's interesting. Just the timeline that it takes. You really have to reset your expectations.
That's every business. I mean, we want it now, but it doesn't always happen now. It's like it's like investing into an index fund. It's like you're not going to put it, $1,000 in today and have $20,000 tomorrow. But like if you give it a long enough timeline, it will. It's just, I always describe this like ice in your veins. Like, do you have ice in your veins? You know what I mean? Like if you're investing in something sound, like if you're investing into a good ad funnel and good retention tactics with email and good strategy that has been proven to work for other people, and you're doing it correctly and you're doing it in line with like your brand mission and all those things, like part of the equation is just having that ice in your veins and knowing like, I'm going to stay the course. I'm seeing positive signals. I'm starting to see positive signals. I'm going to keep riding this out and see what happens over time, because like there's no guarantees. But like even like with me, like when I started posting content, there's no guarantee that people are going to follow me. But I said other people post content, I could start posting it. I think I can make it a little bit better than theirs and just make myself 1% better every single week. And eventually that compounded to now where I have this business and I have this email list and these products and books and everything else. And like I was a nobody. No one knew who I was. I had 0 people on my list, but I just compounded over time. And now it's like year 8 of writing an email to my list every day, and things are cooking, So
I love that analogy of putting money into the stock market, because that is kind of what you're doing, although the return could be way higher for a business. And ideally it is. Otherwise, why wouldn't you just put your money there? But it's like, it's as if you were to put all your money in the stock market and then check it like multiple times a day. And I think that's what makes it so hard, is because you're not just like investing the money and then you don't see it. You're in it every single day. And so you're there for every little up and down that happens. Okay. So we've been through mission, we've been through offers, we've got acquisition nailed kind of in a broad sense. When does traction come into play?
Well, once you have your list, I mean, most people listening to this probably have a list of some size. But once you start acquiring customers, then it's like, how do you deepen the relationship with them? Because that's where the real money in your business is. It's in the customer relationships that you own, the people you've already acquired. And how do you keep marketing to them and serving them and building offers for them and building products and, helping them become the person they want to become through the product vehicles that you create. So the core of that is email marketing. It's always just It's easy money. It's consistent. It's predictable. It's reliable. You own it. You own the email addresses, right? Until someone unsubscribes, obviously. But even then, if someone unsubscribes, they might still be subscribed to SMS, which is another channel you could own. You could have their address for direct mail. So like it is email is like the foundation, but like you get the email list and the customer database so that you can run a more robust retention marketing program and reach people multiple ways. So like the whole goal of the business is to grow the size of the customer list, the size and the quality of the customer list, right? That's everything you're trying to do in business. Like the biggest businesses in the world have the biggest customer bases. Like you look at Costco, like Costco's value is in the customer base. Apple's value is in its customer base. It's the people that they've won over to their side who say, I am the kind of person who likes shopping from this brand, and I'm going to continue to do so. They own that relationship, right? So that's all you're trying to do in business is just not even necessarily grow an email list, but grow a customer list and then own the relationship with that list. And that's where if you look at that, there's that iceberg meme, like, the profits on the front end are going to be small. Even if you get a good ROAS, the profits going to be small on the front end, but the big profits are below the surface on the back end, right? When you continue to make sales from those people you've already acquired, because once you've acquired them as a customer, you don't have to pay another acquisition cost to acquire them again, right? Unless you're, doing like retargeting and things like that, where there is a slight cost. But when you email them, when you send them text messages, it's a very, very small cost to send them a text message. Postcards, even, yeah, you still have to pay for a postcard, but it's very small in comparison to, a Facebook ad might cost you, $30 to $100 to acquire a customer. It might cost you 49 cents or 50 something cents to send a postcard, right? All in. So, it's like it's much cheaper and much more reliable to market to the people who've already given you money before. And it's the easiest money in the business. And I know one guy who had a supplement brand, multiple seven-figure supplement brand. He said, honestly, if Facebook ads went away, my business would be okay for a very long time because of the relationship that I have on my list. And that's powerful because there's a lot of people out there who especially in the these hyper competitive, e-commerce space, it's like there's a Facebook outage and they're losing their shit. They're losing sleep. Their business is going up in flames. And hey, I get it. It sucks. I'm not laughing at them, but I see it all the time. But it's like, okay, well, what if that was just a blip? What if it sucked that happened, but you still have this great relationship with your customer list, so you know how to market to them effectively and send emails that they like reading, they enjoy reading, where there's good content, good storytelling, where they feel like they're part of, the tribe. And you continue to just market to them that way and further that relationship instead of being at the whims of a platform that you don't own or control, right? So that's why that stuff's so important, because that's what's going to give you the profitability and the sustainability and the long-term cash flow, is that, group of customers who have proven that they like your stuff.
Yeah, more stories are just coming up from Farm Rebel, and there was one from the fall last year where we had a client who was expecting this really big bulk beef sale, and because he had such a great one in the spring, or it was a year prior, I don't know how long ago the first one was, but it was to the point where those customers would have bought again. So it wasn't like they still had meat, like they could have bought again, and it kind of flopped. Like he had done all this work to acquire people. He had even sold these small front end bundles to kind of warm them up. And so he was gearing up for this big launch. And what we found when we dug into it was a lot of those customers who had bought the first time did not buy again. And he was relying on that. He was expecting those people just to come back, but hadn't really done any of the work to bring them back. He was just all about let me acquire more people. And so I think a lot of entrepreneurs get stuck in that acquisition trap of I need to get more and more and more customers versus, no, I just need to ascend these customers that I have better. Because if you can do that too, the economics dictate you could afford to spend even more on the acquisition side.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. It's you work so hard. Acquisition is tough. It's not easy. I know I said before, I was it's not the most complex thing in the world, but it takes effort. It takes time. It takes usually cash, right, up front to spend money on ads to get those people. So it's if you went through all that trouble, why are you just going to let these people go? And this is why I email daily. And there's a lot of times I'm like, do I really have to do this every day? And I'm like, yes, I do have to do it every day because like the more I'm in people's inbox, the more consumption that I have of my content, like the more they're going to stick around. I see people who have in my space, they'll have newsletters that are 10 times the size of mine, but I make more money from my list than they do. Right. So it's like, well, I have a better relationship. I email more. I had dialogue more with these people instead of sending out content once a week, or once every other week. So like frequency is your friend, right? And these are the people who, again, you're building a tribe here, right? You're building a movement. You're building a very tight-knit community of customers. It's like, well, how do you do that? By frequent communication. So like sometimes yeah, like you'll expect this big launch, but if you've neglected those people and you start emailing them again because you're hitting them up for money, it's like, oh, okay, I forgot about this guy. Like I get this all the time. Like I'll get an email randomly from a company. I was on their list 2 years ago. I signed up. I didn't remember. I'm like, oh yeah, unsubscribe, not interested. But if they were in my inbox all the time, I'd probably stick around, right? Because I'd have a reason to, right? So you can't neglect the customer list. Like that's where all you take everything away. I mean, with Carnivore Snacks, I'll bring them up again. Like the business got shut down. They had to stop selling. And right now we're doing this pre-launch and it's doing pretty well so far. And the response of the community, I mean, it's all over Twitter. The response, we got probably close to 1,000 replies when we sent out that email the other day. It's insane. So like, even if your business goes away, if you have the customer list and you have the relationship with the customer list, you can be back up and running, right? But if you don't have that because you've neglected these people, then yeah, it's going to be difficult. And that's why like I can't stress the importance of just emailing and always being in the inbox. And people are like, I don't want to email more than once a week. I don't want to bother people. I'm like, then they're going to forget about you, and like maybe you bother one or two people, but those people aren't going to, if they're bothered by your stuff, they're not going to give you money. You know what I mean? Like, how would you expect people who don't want to hear from you to give you money? Like, I don't understand that, right? So I don't care. Like, if some people unsubscribe because it's too much, or oh, you email me every day, it's like, well, you're never going to give me money anyway if that's your belief system. But for the people who have a problem that I could solve, who want solutions, they're going to read everything I write. And I've noticed this with my own subscriber behavior. So, and it's true in any market. In the biggest companies in the world, they email multiple times a day. It's like, well, why are they doing that? Right? They're not emailing once a week, or, they understand that the relationship with that customer, Ralph Lauren, I'm on their list. I've gotten like 4 emails in the past 36 hours about the sale that they're having. They're actually just doing like the same email every time. It's really not great strategy, but still, regardless, they're constantly communicating, right? And there's a reason why they do $9 billion a year of sales. I mean, obviously they've compounded over time, but I'm sure they wouldn't be doing it unless it worked.
Why'd you guys shut down? What happened with Carnival Snacks?
The Ohio Department of Agriculture came and shut them down because they didn't like the method of cooking that they were using. Essentially, like there's these university-backed studies that say like there's specific methods that they want them to use, and basically like they kind of just changed their mind on a whim. Um, we wrote an email about it the other day. We posted it on X, but what they're doing right now is they're doing a challenge study through they're doing two challenge studies right now to basically prove that like their methodology is safe and superior. But it's kind of like it's a bit of government overreach, to be honest. But yeah, it's like because it's not one of the approved jerky methods of producing meat snacks, more or less.
They're saying no to meat. They got to say yes to meat.
They're gonna be saying yes to meat.
They're not gonna have a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah. I think one of the things that also tends to trip people up in my experience is they feel uncomfortable sending more emails so that they can make more money. And they're like, I don't know what I'm going to email about. I don't know what I'm going to send. And I think as long as you have a relevant reason to send an email, it almost doesn't matter. It's like whatever it is. I mean, it can be something random. It could be some obscure holiday.
I wrote an email about how I like spaghetti and meatballs. And there was no call to action. I just said, hey, I just had a really good spaghetti meatball dish. And I realized how perfect of a meal this is. And I just wrote an email about it and like told people that. And I said, there's no real point to this email. I just had to tell you what I was feeling and have a good day. People still talk about that email. Like they're like, that was amazing. I can't believe you actually sent that. And they were like, replies, dozens of replies, but like, that actually is a great meal. Like no one ever talks about spaghetti and meatballs. And it was so funny. Like you can write about whatever the hell you want. Like that's the thing. It doesn't have to be like the science of meat or like, like you don't have to get in everything technical. It's like people are going to buy from the people that they like. So if you share things that you like, you will start to attract people who have common interests. I'll write about books I'm reading. I'll write about movies I've seen. Not that I watch many now, but don't really have time for that. But like back in the day, I used to, or like, hey, we went on vacation, or we went to this trip, or we did this cool thing over the weekend. I took my son to the trampoline park the other day. We did our first family board meeting. I wrote an email about that, right? And like, it's nothing like technical about email marketing, but people like that stuff because we bond with people we have common interests with. So like I think sharing anything is going to better than sharing nothing, because otherwise, like if you don't talk, if you're at a party or you're at a social function and you see someone across the room, maybe you've seen them a few times, but you never talk to them, like you don't feel like you know them, you don't feel like you can trust them. But then let's say it's like, your kid has soccer practice and you see another parent over there and you talk to them every single week, or you have practice 3 times a week, you start talking to them 3 times a week, you feel like you're good friends with this person after a while. Why is that? Right? It's the same thing with email, same thing with marketing. So the more you hear from someone, the more comfortable you're going to feel with them, the more comfortable you'll feel buying from them. So frequency is your friend. I'll always stand by that.
Love that. Do you have a hard stop right now? You got to run.
I could probably go for like 5 more minutes.
Okay.
I think.
I wanted to ask what is the secret to a great spaghetti and meatball dish?
I think it is pecorino. If you get some good pecorino and you got to use a copious amount, almost to the point where like the sauce turns a little pink. I think, the quality of the meat is super important. But like the thing is, it's like it's four things. It's the cheese, the meat, the pasta, and the sauce, right? But just the ratios of macronutrient content, and the like what a perfect meal. I don't know who invented that, but like such a perfect meal. And like you feel like a mafia boss, like you're Al Capone when you're eating it, you know what I mean? It's just very like very underrated dish, like the way that the fat from the meatballs interacts with the sauce and the carbs in the pasta. Like name a better dish than spaghetti and meatballs. It's very hard, you know what I mean? Like someone got it right. I don't know who did it, but someone figured it out. Like, so whenever we get Italian, I'm like, I'm getting spaghetti and meatballs because screw it.
I feel like I just got a glimpse into your aspiration, Chris, which is mafia boss.
Al
So
Capone, yeah, there we go.
if I'm ever putting together an offer that has something to do with that, it's you I'm targeting.
That's me. That's me. Yeah, 100%.
Cool, man. Well, yeah, we can end it here. I did have a couple questions for you, but yeah, let me go ahead and stop the recording. Look at that. Me keeping my promises. Here we are at the end. Thanks for sticking around. I appreciate it. And if you want more content like this, I do run a free newsletter. It's called Profit Patterns, and we just look at marketing, all kinds of marketing, good marketing, bad marketing, case studies, insights. Maybe we'll do more interviews like this. I'm not sure yet. Just thought this was fun. And that's pretty much it. You can find me mostly on LinkedIn and Twitter if you want to follow me there, but I don't really post as much there. It's mostly just the newsletter where I keep the good stuff. And so yeah, thanks for tuning in. And if you want to read The Moat by Chris Orzechowski, it is on Amazon right now, and like I said, probably on his website. If I have the ability to put a link somewhere, I will put a link directly to it as well. Probably not Amazon if I can, because he probably would keep more of the money if it's not Amazon. But either way, I'll get you a link if you want to check it out. And see you next time.